One day when I was coming home from work, I was a nurse. It started raining heavily, and I felt fire in my body. An unknown man came in his car and said, "Come with me." I agreed, and he took me to his bungalow. When he saw my wet body, he could not contain his feelings. He took me to his room and said, "Charlotte, I want physical pleasure." It was like an electric shock. I had to stay at the hospital until 10 p.m. My shift ended late, and when I finished all my chores and went outside, the weather had changed. It had been unbearably hot for a few days, but in the evening the clouds gathered and cooled the air. It started to rain, and for some strange reason I felt uneasy. As the raindrops fell on my body, I felt a strange sense of calm and anxiety at the same time. The rain was like a balm on my tired soul, but at the same time fueled a strange restlessness in me that I couldn't explain. As I walked in the rain, there was not a single car at the bus stop. It was about a 30-minute walk to my hostel, but the heavy rain caused water to accumulate along the way. I had no choice but to walk. The deserted road kept me uneasy. Being a single unmarried woman, I couldn't help but feel vulnerable. My thoughts swirled around the countless stories I had heard of women facing problems in similar situations. I decided to try to hitch a ride if a car showed up, even though I was hesitant to trust a stranger at this hour. A black car pulled up. It looked expensive, probably belonged to a rich man. I waved, and the car stopped. A tall, surly man got out, his tailored clothes suggesting that this was someone important. He approached me and asked me imperiously, "What are you doing standing here in the rain?" His voice was deep and commanding, breaking through the noise of the downpour. I was annoyed by his tone. "I like getting wet," I replied, annoyed, and my frustration spilled out. "Are you crazy?" He snapped back with an incredulous look on his face. "No, I'm a nurse," I replied curtly, standing my ground. He looked unconvinced. "Then why aren't you at the hospital? Why are you standing here getting wet?" "My shift is over," I explained. "There are no free cabs, and I left my phone at home. I need to get back to the hostel, but it's too far to walk in this weather." "Get in," he finally said, though I could still hear the arrogance in his voice. It wasn't a suggestion, but an order. I hesitated, but the rain and fatigue pushed me to agree. I climbed into his car, the leather seats cool against my wet clothes. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the rain quickly put me into a deep sleep. When I awoke, I was surprised to find myself in an unfamiliar place, not in my dormitory, but in his bungalow. I was wearing a robe and my clothes had disappeared. Panic gripped me. Questions and fear stirred in my mind. A man appeared with a glass of water in his hands. "Relax," he said in a calm but firm tone. "You were exhausted and your clothes were soaked. I didn't know where your dormitory was, and you fell asleep before I could ask." "Who changed me?" I demanded to say, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "I did," he answered bluntly. "You were trembling. I had no choice." Furious and embarrassed, I pounced on him. "How dare you? You had no right." My hands clenched into fists, and I felt my body shaking. He stood firm, his gaze unwavering. "Charlotte, you are beautiful. I couldn't help but notice it, but I haven't crossed any boundaries. But if you keep blaming me, I might lose control." I froze. His words both angered and intrigued me at the same time. There was something about him, a dangerous attraction. I could feel the tension in the room, and I found myself caught between anger and an inexplicable attraction to him. "What's your name?" I asked, even though my voice had softened. "Andrew," he replied. "And you?" "Charlotte," I replied. He smiled, a charming and disarming smile that made my heart race. "Charlotte, you have a spark in you. It's hard to ignore." Against my better judgment, I was drawn to him. Over breakfast, we had an intense conversation. He talked about his life, his work, and his ambitions, and I told him about my problems as a nurse. His sincerity surprised me, and I realized I was slowly letting my guard down. When we finished eating, he offered a car ride to show me his favorite places in the city. I hesitated but agreed, curiosity taking over. As we drove, I realized there was more to Andrew than his initial arrogance. There were many layers to him: charm, ambition, and vulnerability. His stories were vivid, and his passion for life was infectious. We found ourselves in a secluded park. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a magical light that seemed to transform the world around us. "This is a beautiful place," I said, admiring the serene landscape. Andrew turned to me, his gaze intense. "Not as beautiful as you, Charlotte." His compliment caught me off guard. I looked away, embarrassed. "I'm not used to compliments." "You should get used to them," he said softly. "You deserve to hear how wonderful you are." For a moment, I felt noticed in a way I hadn't before. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and sharing our dreams. When he drove me home, I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement, my emotions raging in a way I couldn't define. "Charlotte," he said as we pulled up to my dorm, "promise me we'll see each other again." I hesitated, but something in his face made me say yes. "Okay," I said quietly. Andrew smiled, and in that moment I realized it was the beginning of something I couldn't define. As I walked into the dorm, my heart raced in anticipation of what might happen next. Memories of his intense gaze and confident demeanor kept me awake, leaving me both excited and anxious at the same time. What had I just gotten myself into? In the days that followed, my thoughts kept returning to Andrew. His voice, his smile, the way he looked at me all replayed in my head. I checked my phone often, hoping to get a message from him. When it finally came, my heart thumped with joy. "Hey Charlotte, just wanted to see how you were doing. I hope you're not missing me too much." A smile played on my lips as I typed out a reply. "Hi, I'm fine. At work as usual. But I missed our adventure." A moment later, my phone buzzed again. "That's good to hear. How about we plan something for this weekend? I know a little cafe with amazing pastries." My heart raced at the thought of seeing him again. Despite my initial hesitation, I couldn't deny that I was drawn to him. "That sounds wonderful. What time?" "How about Saturday at 10 in the morning? I'll pick you up," he replied. The week went on, and I kept daydreaming about my upcoming date. When Saturday morning came, I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to look my best. When the doorbell rang, I was overcome with a wave of nervous excitement. I straightened my dress and opened the door. There he was, looking very attractive. "Wow, you look amazing," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Thanks, you clean up good too," I replied, unable to hide a smile. The day ahead promised something new and exciting, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.